And imagine giving away 40 years of your strength, your mornings, your passions, your very breath in exchange for a promise. A promise that one day, when your hair is gray and your body is tired, and life will finally begin. Imagine reaching that moment only to discover the promise was a mere age, the treasure chest empty, the time gone, the self forgotten. This is not a rare tragedy. It is the story of millions who labor until 65 and arrive with nothing, but the echo of years spent waiting for a life that never came from the earliest days, and people are taught that life follows a straight and predictable path: go to school, find employment, labor faithfully for decades, and then arrive at an age where the fruits of all sacrifice will finally be gathered. This path is presented as natural, unquestionable, and inevitable. It whispers the promise that if one simply endures, a sense of safety and stability will bloom in the autumn years of life. Security becomes the idol at the center of the collective vision, and the invisible horizon everyone is told to walk toward. Yet what most discover is that the horizon recedes with every step. The promise of security turns out to be an illusion, and a mirage shimmering in the desert of long labor. This illusion is powerful because it is woven not just into social institutions but into the psyche itself. From youth, people internalize the belief that they must suppress their instincts, delay their desires, and silence their passions in exchange for a future reward. They are taught to equate worth with productivity, and loyalty with obedience, and happiness with possession of material stability. The idea of security becomes a substitute for life itself, and a projection of hope onto a distant future that never truly arrives. In the marketplace of modern existence, this illusion is reinforced through stories and images, through smiling elders by the seaside, and carefree after decades of toil, golden years painted as the rightful destination of anyone who has played the game correctly. But the picture is deceptive. For countless individuals, and the end of the working road is not a golden meadow but an empty field. Health has been eroded, vitality consumed, relationships strained, and finances remain precarious. And the illusion is revealed too late, yet it held such power that many never dared to question it, while the years were still theirs to shape. The psychological weight of this illusion is heavy, and it creates an atmosphere of constant postponement. Every dream is placed on hold, every passion deferred, every risk silenced by the refrain, someday. And when it is safe, safety becomes the justification for surrendering today. But the cost of this bargain is steep, for the self is not nourished by distant promises. It needs meaning, vitality, and presence in the here and now. The illusion of security steals from the present in the name of a future that rarely delivers its gifts. Thus, countless workers reach the symbolic threshold of 65 only to awaken from a long trance. They discover that security was never guaranteed, and that the institutions they served offer little in return for a lifetime of loyalty, that the treasures they imagined have dissolved into the air of broken promises. And they realize that in chasing the idea of safety, they surrendered the raw, unrepeatable moments of living itself. The work, in its modern form, is no longer simply the exchange of labor for sustenance. It has become a ritual of sacrifice performed daily before an altar no one can see but all are compelled to serve. Men and women rise before dawn, give the best of their energy to tasks that often hold no meaning for them, and return home with only fragments of their vitality left. The rhythm repeats day after day, year after year, and until entire lives have been consumed by the silent demand of the machine. This machine is not made of gears and steel alone, though factories and offices may provide its shell. It is a system of thought, a vast network of expectation and obligation that transforms human beings into instruments of production. It devours time, the one resource no one can replenish. It consumes creativity by channeling imagination into routines that generate profit for others. It drains the body, asking for strength in youth and offering only fatigue in return. And it rarely, and if ever, feeds the deeper hunger of the soul, the need for meaning, beauty, and genuine creation. The tragedy lies not only in the exhaustion it produces, but in the seduction that keeps people bound to it. Many believe they are working toward freedom, that if they endure long enough, and the machine will eventually release them into a better life. But in truth, the machine has no intention of granting freedom. Its nature is endless appetite. The more it is fed, the more it demands. Promotions, titles, even higher wages may be offered as tokens of recognition, but these are merely polished chains binding the worker more securely to the cycle. Over decades, and this cycle becomes so normal that few recognize its true shape. A worker may give away 30 or 40 years, believing they are building stability, and while in reality they are pouring themselves into a bottomless vessel. The wages received are often just enough to keep them tethered, never enough to liberate them. And like a sacrificial flame that consumes without end, the machine burns through the years of human life, leaving little but ashes of regret when the fire has run its course. And what makes the machine so powerful is that it feeds not only on human effort, but on human belief. It thrives because people are taught to equate endless labor with virtue, obedience with morality, and exhaustion with honor. To stop feeding it is seen as reckless, even shameful. And so entire generations march into its jaws willingly, and mistaking their sacrifice for necessity and their suffering for purpose. The machine has no face, no voice, no form, yet it governs as though it were a deity. And taking the strength of youth and returning little more than emptiness when the cycle reaches its end, the great deception of modern existence is the belief that life can be postponed. And people are told that fulfillment is something to be earned, that joy must wait until the proper season, that rest, love, travel, and creativity belong to a distant future called retirement. And they labor under the weight of this bargain, carrying the hope that one day when obligations are fulfilled and accounts are secure, the door to authentic living will finally open. Yet while they wait, and the shadow of deferred life silently grows, feeding on all the moments withheld, all the passions denied, all the days sacrificed to the idea of a tomorrow that may never arrive. And this shadow is not simply the absence of pleasure. It is the accumulation of unlived potential, the residue of all the choices not made in the name of safety. Every time someone says, "I will do it later," a fragment of vitality slips into the shadow. Every postponed dream, every silenced impulse, every suppressed desire becomes fuel for its growth. Over years, it swells into a presence that surrounds the individual, reminding them not of what they achieved but of what they abandoned. The shadow is the ghost of the life unlived, and it waits patiently until the moment of reckoning. When the long-anticipated age of 65 finally arrives, many look inward with the expectation of freedom, only to find that the soil of their spirit has grown barren. The passions they thought could be easily revived are withered. The strength of the body once taken for granted has ebbed away, and relationships that could have been nurtured over decades are often shallow, neglected, or broken. In chasing the promise of a future life, they discover that life itself was happening all along, and they were absent from it. This condition is more than regret, it is a form of spiritual starvation. Human beings are not built to postpone their essence indefinitely. The soul seeks expression in the present, through creation, through connection, through the pursuit of meaning. When these impulses are denied year after year, something vital within begins to atrophy. And the deferred life is not a neutral waiting room, it is a slow erosion of the inner world. To arrive at old age with money but without vitality is to realize that one has traded away the irreplaceable for the illusion of security. The shadow of deferred life reveals itself most cruelly in the small, piercing moments when an elder recalls the trip they never took, the book they never wrote, the love they never pursued, and the risk they never embraced. These memories appear like specters, not as distant curiosities but as wounds that remind them of what could have been. The tragedy is that the shadow was always avoidable, and yet the power of cultural conditioning, fear, and obedience to the machine made it seem inevitable. And so countless individuals step into their final chapters carrying not the richness of a life fully lived, but the heavy burden of all they left unlived. In the theater of modern life, and progress is the mask worn to conceal emptiness. People are taught that advancement, more titles, more possessions, more status, marks the measure of a life well lived. They pursue promotions, and chase recognition, and display symbols of success as if these ornaments could serve as proof of meaning. But beneath the polished mask, the soul often whispers its dissatisfaction. And for progress without purpose is nothing more than movement in circles, activity mistaken for growth, accumulation mistaken for fulfillment. The mask itself is seductive, and for it shines with the glow of collective approval. When one is promoted, society applauds. When one buys a larger house or drives a more expensive car, the world nods in admiration. And yet the applause is hollow, and the nod is empty, for they affirm only conformity to an external standard, not the blossoming of the inner life. The mask is praised, while the face behind it grows pale and silent. To wear the mask is to appear strong while inwardly starved, to appear accomplished while secretly restless, and to appear certain while haunted by doubts that cannot be spoken aloud. The pursuit of progress often becomes a ritual more powerful than belief itself, and entire lives are organized around climbing a ladder whose top is never visible. Each rung is promised to bring satisfaction, yet when the rung is reached, the satisfaction fades quickly, and replaced by the demand to climb higher. The worker, the professional, the dreamer-turned-laborer all learn to suppress the voice asking, "Why?" and instead focus on the next step, and the next achievement, the next external proof that they are moving forward. Progress becomes less about life and more about escape. From the fear of being left behind, from the fear of insignificance, and from the terror of confronting one's own inner emptiness. Over time, the mask fuses to the face. People forget where the mask ends and their true self begins, and they introduce themselves by their job titles rather than their passions. They measure their worth by their possessions rather than their relationships. They define themselves by how much they produce rather than by what they love. And in this slow fusion, Something essential slips away, the authenticity of a life rooted in being rather than having. And the mask of progress is powerful because it allows the individual to avoid confrontation with their own inner void. As long as the world admires, the silence of the soul can be ignored. But late at night, or in moments of solitude, the mask feels heavied, the applause fades, the external symbols lose their shine, and the truth begins to press forward. And progress without meaning reveals itself as a hollow idol, demanding endless sacrifice yet offering nothing that truly nourishes the spirit. In the endless chase for survival, something essential is quietly left behind. The self with its original desires, its childhood visions, its instinct for wonder, and is placed in the shadows so that the demands of labor and obligation may take center stage. A person may spend decades performing tasks, meeting deadlines, earning wages, and yet scarcely touch the core of who they are. They build a life around necessity, but necessity alone cannot sustain the soul. The forgotten self lingers, patient but restless, waiting for recognition that rarely comes. The forgetting begins early. A child brimming with imagination is told to be practical. A youth burning with passion is advised to choose stability. And dreams that do not conform to the machinery of society are dismissed as fantasies, distractions, or even dangers. Slowly, the voice of the inner self, once clear and vibrant, becomes faint. In its place grows the external voice of expectation: study hard, work harder, keep climbing, provide, endure. To ignore this command is seen as irresponsibility, so most obey in obedience. And they gain approval, but in gaining approval, they lose intimacy with their own being. The world rarely rewards authenticity. It rewards conformity, production, and efficiency. And a painter who sets aside the brush to sit in an office, a writer who buries words beneath spreadsheets, a musician who silences their instrument in favor of reports, all believe they are making a reasonable trade, yet what they trade away is the root of their aliveness. Over time, and the forgotten self does not vanish, but becomes buried under the debris of duties. Its silence becomes a subtle ache, a feeling of incompleteness that no promotion or paycheck can fully erase. And the consequences of forgetting are profound. Relationships suffer when the self is absent, for love requires presence, and presence requires authenticity. And creativity dries up when the inner voice is ignored, for imagination feeds on freedom, not on schedules. Even health deteriorates, and for the body cannot thrive when it is only treated as a tool for productivity. The forgotten self expresses its hunger in disguised forms: dissatisfaction, boredom, anxiety, a sense that life is passing by without ever being truly touched. These signals are often misread as personal weakness, when in truth they are cries from the soul demanding recognition. And many believe they can return to the forgotten self later. That retirement will be the time to paint, to travel, to live authentically. Yet the self is not a machine that can be switched on after decades of neglect. It is more like a flame: it must be fed regularly or it diminishes. By the time one turns toward it, and the flame may be faint, the energy to nurture it depleted, the years too few to cultivate what was abandoned. What remains is the awareness of distance. The haunting recognition that the person one was meant to be has waited faithfully in silence, while the outer life marched on without pause. There comes a moment in many lives when the veil lifts, when the long rhythm of work and obligation is interrupted by the stillness of age. At that threshold, the years stretch backward rather than forward, and the question arises not of what will be built, but of what has already been lived. For some, this moment arrives with peace, but for many, it arrives with a heavy weight. The realization that decades of toil were given not to meaning, but to survival, not to passion, but to endurance. This awakening, though clear, comes after the strength to alter the course has already waned, and the tragedy of awakening too late is not poverty of possessions. A person may have a house, a pension, a collection of objects gathered over years, and yet still feel destitute. And true poverty lies in the recognition that the essential experiences of life, love expressed fully, creativity given space, courage embraced in youth, were never lived. It is not the absence of wealth that wounds, but the absence of moments that can never be reclaimed. This kind of poverty cuts deeper than hunger, for it is the hunger of the soul itself, starving not for food but for time already lost. The heart remembers what the mind tries to dismiss. It recalls the journeys never taken, the words never spoken, the risks never dared, and these memories rise unbidden in quiet hours, forming a procession of ghosts. Each ghost carries the shape of a life that might have been, a career abandoned for passion, a love pursued with boldness, and a path chosen out of instinct rather than fear. These are not mere regrets but vivid presences, pressing against the soul with the weight of possibility denied. And to awaken too late is to be surrounded by these ghosts, to feel their silent gaze as one counts the years left and finds them insufficient to rewrite the story. And this awakening often comes when the body no longer has the vitality it once did. Dreams postponed for someday meet the limitations of weakened limbs, dulled senses, or declining health. The mountain one wished to climb is no longer reachable. The book unwritten feels too heavy to begin. The love once deferred has long since moved on. The tragedy lies not only in the loss of opportunity, but in the recognition that the opportunity was present all along and was refused for reasons that now seem small: fear of failure and desire for approval, obedience to convention. To awaken too late is to see the architecture of one's life with sudden clarity, to understand the scaffolding of compromises, hesitations, and silences that built its structure. What once seemed stable now appears fragile. What once seemed responsible now feels hollow. And the years of effort reveal themselves not as steps toward freedom, but as layers of distance from the self that always waited beneath. Every generation inherits a script that says fulfillment will come later. The lines are memorized early: work hard now, sacrifice joy, postpone freedom, and one day, when the proper age arrives, life will finally begin. Yet beneath this inherited script lies a quieter and more urgent voice, a call to step outside the illusion and claim life in the present. This call does not shout. It whispers in moments of dissatisfaction, in the silence after a long day of labor, and in the quiet envy felt when encountering someone who dares to live authentically. It is a call to remember that life is not a rehearsal, that the stage is already set, and the play is already underway. And reclaiming life begins with seeing through the spell of postponement. The illusion insists that security must be earned before joy can be permitted. But the truth is that joy itself is a form of security. When one engages in meaningful creation, when one builds relationships rooted in authenticity, when one honors the desires of the soul, a foundation is laid that no amount of money alone can provide. To live deliberately is not reckless. It is the only way to truly inhabit existence. And yet the conditioning of society makes this recognition difficult, for the collective rewards obedience and fears those who step outside the cycle. To answer the call requires courage, and for it means stepping away from the mask of progress and into the raw territory of uncertainty. It means risking failure, risking rejection, risking the loss of approval, and in order to gain something far greater alignment with one's inner truth. The soul does not thrive in safety built on denial. It thrives in the risk of expression, the pursuit of creation, and the vulnerability of love, the embrace of curiosity. Reclaiming life is less about breaking free from work itself than about refusing to let work consume the whole of one's being. And this reclamation does not wait for the perfect time, for the perfect time never arrives. It happens in the present moment, in choosing to pursue the forgotten passion, in daring to speak what has been silenced, in walking away from paths that no longer nourish. Each act of reclamation is small but powerful, for it begins to restore the fragments of self that were surrendered. Over time, these fragments gather into a fuller presence, a sense of inhabiting one's own existence rather than merely enduring it. The call to reclaim life now is not an abstract philosophy but a living demand. Every day spent in postponement feeds the shadow of deferred life, while every day lived with intention feeds the soul, and the choice is constant and inescapable: to wait for a life that may never arrive, or to claim the life already here, to believe the illusion of tomorrow, or to awaken to the reality of today.